Bonjour, welcome to Wahsa Distance Education Center's radio Zoom classes. This is MEL3E, grade 11 workplace math, and I'm the teacher, Bronwyn Slade. If you'd like to participate live today, you can call the Wahsa studio at 1-800-465-7144 or 737-4017. You can listen on the radio at 91.9 FM and also on the television at Bell Express View Channel 972. You are always welcome to join me live through the Zoom link, which is available from me, your teacher, and also your DEC. Our classes are scheduled from Monday through Thursday from 9 till 10 in the morning, and we are in our 6th week of our 9-week course. At this point, you definitely should be submitting work for marking. A reminder that the support questions, the ones with the pencil icon, are not for marking. These are practice problems, and you can decide which ones and how many to do. If you're understanding concept, feel free to skip questions. You don't have to do them just because they're there, though they are good practice to make sure that you're comfortable with the material. If you are short on time, it's understandable if you need to pick and choose which ones are best for you to do. However, if you need more practice, please feel free to ask, and I'd be happy to provide you more practice. The key questions, the ones with the key icon, these are the questions that are marked. So please do all of these questions. Show all of your work, your steps, and your thinking. This way I can give you credit for what you understand and where I don't have to take as many marks off if you make errors. If you only give me a final answer and the final answer is not correct, I can't give you any part marks. If you show me your work and you're doing part or all of the process correctly and you just made a calculation error or you're making one conceptual error, then I can give you part marks for what you do understand. So please show me all of your steps and all of your thinking. So how do you actually submit your work for marking? Well, there's 3 methods. The first is to scan your work and send it electronically. You can scan your completed work using a device. If you have an Apple device, the Notes app that comes with the device has a scan function, and the Android devices have a Google Drive app that has a scan function. These are both free apps if you, for some reason, don't have them on your device, and the scanning is fairly straightforward. If you need support, please reach out. I'm happy to help you. And if you do need to take pictures instead of scanning, no worries, go for it, take pictures, that's totally fine. Just scanning them makes the process a little bit simpler for me. The files are a little bit smaller and a little bit easier to manage, but again, if you need to take pictures, totally fine to do. Then you can send them to me either through email to studentwork@nnec.on.ca and CC them to bronwyn.slate@nnec.on.ca. Or you can also send them to me through Facebook Messenger, where my name is B. Slate Wahsa. The second method is to drop your work off in Sioux Lookout. We have an outdoor mailbox at our location at 74 Front Street. We're the bright red building next to the post office, and we have a small white mailbox next to our side entrance. We are not yet open to the public, hopefully soon, but for now, just put your work in that mailbox and I'll get it back to you as soon as I can. The third method is to hand your work into your DEC. Your DEC can either send your work through the Express or fax it to 807-737-1732 or toll-free fax to 1-800-463-7852. Students are also welcome to fax in their work if you have access to a fax machine. If you'd like to connect with me through social media, both my Facebook and my YouTube channel are under the name B. Slate Wahsa. If you friend me on Facebook or subscribe to my YouTube channel, you get notifications every time I upload one of our lessons. All of our radio Zoom classes are uploaded to YouTube shortly after broadcasting. And there are also short videos explaining common errors and confusing concepts on my YouTube channel. If you're struggling with something, this is a great place to go and check it out before doing a general internet search. I might have already addressed it, and there might be something that's just a little bit easier to find because I've already addressed it on the channel, and it might be more specific to our course. So it's a really good place to start. If you need a little bit more help and you're unable to get a hold of me, it's after hours or something like that, it's a good place to go first before you just do a general internet search. Math is a really visual subject, so I strongly encourage you to access the videos, either joining me live through Zoom. Whether or not you want to talk or ask questions, that's fine. You don't have to, but just watching and seeing, getting the full experience is really going to help you understand opposed to just listening. If you can't join live, watching the replays on YouTube is another great option because then you can slow things down, pause them, take breaks, come back to them. It gives you lots of flexibility and you can do it on your own time. However, if you don't have reliable internet and either of those options are actual options for you, let me know and I'm happy to send you a copy of all of our recordings so that you can still get the full experience and set yourself up for the most success. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out and contact me. My email address is bronwyn.slate, and that is spelled BRONWYN.SLATE@nnec.on.ca. You can connect with me through Facebook. My name is B. Slate Wahsa there. Call me at the office at 807-737-1488 or extension 22, with extension 2209, or also toll free at 1-800-667-3703. My office hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. So I'm happy to make a plan to connect outside of that time if that doesn't work for you. All right, today we are wrapping up Unit 3 with Lesson 15 and talking about leasing vehicles. So our learning goals are that at the end of this lesson, you'll be able to calculate the total costs of leasing a vehicle, and you will understand the fine print and procedures involved in leasing a vehicle. You know that you've met your learning goals because you can actually calculate leasing costs, and you can explain the likely fine print and the procedures when leasing a vehicle. Of course, this is going to be different depending on the actual leasing agreement, but we're going to talk about the general ones. All right, so when will you use this in real life? Well, we're learning about how information is communicated. So you may or may not choose to lease a vehicle. I've never leased a vehicle, but understanding how information is communicated through agreements, through contracts, through advertisements is all really, really important, as these all do come up in our lives. And so this is the kind of thing that we're developing the skill of how we can read information and process what is actually there and figure out what we need to know and what might be extra information that isn't the most useful for us. But first, let's do some mental math and activate our brain. All right, I don't believe in Mad Math minutes. They stress people out. They don't actually develop skills. They celebrate speed and memorization and not deep thinking or processing time. So we don't do that in my class. Instead, we develop strategies that we can apply in various situations that help us use numbers in friendly ways that are comfortable for ourselves. Today's question is 2,876 divided by 15. And we're going to use the strategy of multiplying up. So generally, looking at this number, I would most likely reach for a calculator and do it, which many of us now have calculators on our phones. And so if we needed to do this, we could do it. But in some situations, you might not. And so what are some strategies that you could do that would just mean that you could do this in your head or by hand? So remember, using the strategy of multiplying up means that we're going to start with 15 things, and we're going to figure out how many groups of 15 fit into 2,876. So I'm going to say, well, I can see that 100 groups of 15 is equal to 1,500. And that definitely fits within 2,876. Now, I can also tell that 200 groups is not going to fit. That is going to be too much. So that'll be 3,000. So that'll be more. But I could say, okay, well, 50 groups is going to be half of 1,500. So 50 groups of 15 is half of that. So that's 750. So that means 150 groups of 15 is going to be those two numbers added together. So that's 2,250. Okay. So then I can see, well, so 150 groups of 15 is 2,250. That's getting close to 2,876, but we're not quite there yet. So I still need about another 400. So while half of 50 is 25 groups, so if I say 25 groups of 15 is equal to half 750, so that's going to be 375. So that means that 175 groups, if I add 25 groups to 150 groups of 15, is, I'm going to add this to that. So 250 plus 375 is going to be 1,125. So that's going to be, oh, so then, oh no, that's not right. Sorry, my bad. 625. That's what I meant to say. My bad. Brain just didn't work. So 2,625. Let me check that again. So 75 plus 50 is going to be 125. So 125 plus 200 is 325. 325 plus 300 is 625. There we go. So yes. So we're getting, again, we are getting closer to, we are at 2,625, which is getting pretty close to 2,876. So now I'm going to say, okay, well, maybe now I'm going to, instead of thinking of such big groups, I'm going to think of, well, 10 groups of 15 is 150. Now this looks like it's a lot of writing, and it is, but a bunch of this I would really do in my head. Most likely I wouldn't write most of this down. I would do it in my head, and so that would be a little bit easier. So that means 185 groups of 15 is going to be, well, I'm going to add 2,625 plus 150, so 2,775. So I'm 101 away. So I can say, okay, well, 101 is how much I have left to separate into 15 groups. Well, I know that 15 doubled is 30. So that means 30 doubled is 60. So that's 4 groups of 15. And if I add another 2 groups of 16, I have 90. So that's 6 groups of 16. And that's going to be 90. And if I add another group of 15, that would be 105, which is more than what we have. So if I say, sorry, 6 groups of 15 is equal to 90. So that means that 191 groups, because 185 plus 6 groups of 15 is equal to 2,775 plus 90. So that's going to be 2,865. And then, so that means that 2,876 divided by 15 is 191 groups, with a remainder of, well, we have 2,865 and we need to go up to 2,876. So with a remainder of 11, there's 11 left over that I can't put into a group of 15. So again, this is a lot of writing down, but you wouldn't necessarily have to write it all down, and it's just a way of thinking. So using logical amounts to increase to get closer and closer to your final destination. Okay, mine's on. What do we need to know today? We just need to have some vocabulary that we make sure that we understand when we're talking about leasing vehicles. So an open-ended lease is a lease that requires the consumer to pay the difference between the vehicle's residual value and the actual value when the lease ends. So if there's any value still in the vehicle at the end of your lease, you have to pay it. A termination fee or a disposal or deposition fee is the amount leasees, so that's the person who's leasing the vehicle, the consumer, must pay at the end of a closed-end lease if they choose not to pay the residual value and buy the car. Security deposit is a cash sum that the lessor requires, so the person who's the car dealership requires at lease inception as a safeguard against non-payment. Lessors often require a security deposit of about 1 monthly payment. So a security deposit is the safeguard. This means that if you don't return the vehicle in really good condition, they keep that security deposit that isn't going towards any of the value. It's just a security for the dealership. Mileage allowance. So the maximum number of miles or kilometers a leased vehicle can be driven per year without incurring a penalty. So this allowance is stated in the lease contract. So this is always saying this is the part that if you drive over a certain number of kilometers, then you're going to have to pay a certain amount of money because you went over the agreement. Wear and tear charges. Charges for damages to a lease car that are greater than normal or reasonable. Be sure these are defined in the lease agreement and are agreeable, or you could pay hefty fees at lease end. So obviously a vehicle is going to have a certain amount of wear and tear just by using it. That is normal. But if you have big scratches, big dents, big cracks in the windshield, things like this that are not just normal wear and tear, then you're going to have to pay extra fees on top of everything else because the car's not as good condition. They can't resell at the same value. It has less value. Early termination. When the consumer ends the lease before the agreed upon time, you end up paying a big fee. So it's really important to make a decision about how long you really want this vehicle before you sign your agreement. And default charge, a penalty fee charged to the leasee for a late monthly lease payment. So if you make a late payment, you get charged money. So that's a lot of language. And hopefully most of it makes sense. And as we go through the lesson, we'll come across some of it again and we'll deal with it again. So let's understand what it means to lease cars. How does that all work? This is on page 40 of your IL booklet. So a car lease allows you to drive a brand new vehicle for a fixed period at an agreed monthly rate. So you're getting a new car. We talked about how in previous lesson, how new cars are really generally expensive and lose a lot of value quickly. But leasing a vehicle means that you get a brand new vehicle. But you're still paying a monthly fee for it. It's like a long-term rental. And once the fixed lease period is over, this is typically between 2 to 4 years, then the customer must either return the car to the leasing company or purchase it for market value. So you purchase it for however much it is worth now. There are extra fees, which a security deposit, which is refundable at the end of the lease, a down payment, excess kilometer usage fees, that's like the mileage fee, and you pay HST on the monthly payments. At the end of your lease, you have 3 options. 1, return the vehicle and lease a new one. 2, purchase the vehicle at a predetermined price and keep it. Or 3, return the vehicle and walk away and not get another vehicle from that place. So what are the benefits of having a lease agreement? So leases are often only for 3 years. You can get a new car more often. How this makes sense to me is that my grandmother, when she was older and didn't want to deal with car issues, didn't want them to be breaking down or having to maintain them and or deal with bigger issues. So as she was getting older, she would lease vehicles so that she would consistently have a new car that was in good working order, and she wouldn't be responsible. She would just take it to the place she leased it from, and they would deal with the general maintenance and any issues. So she didn't have to worry about that in her older years when it was more of a hassle than a benefit. You drive the latest safety and driving technology with potentially better fuel economy because you're driving newer vehicles consistently every few years. This means that you are getting to get the newest and the best vehicle options. Your payments are lower on leases compared to car loans. There are lower maintenance costs as you're always covered by the factory warranty because you're in that first few years. Leasing doesn't require a car loan approval or a hefty payment up front. So if you have a low credit score, you struggle with your credit ratings, then this could be a good option if you need a vehicle. And there is a lower or no down payment option generally so that you don't have to have a large chunk of money to start with. Some disadvantages of leasing vehicles is that there's limited mileage. So generally they are saying they don't want you to drive the vehicle a lot because a vehicle needs to be driven, but the less it is driven, the better, the longer it's going to live. So with leasing agreements, they give you a limit. So if you are driving across the country a lot or driving to other places consistently, if you drive a lot, if you're commuting over an hour every day, twice a day, then leasing probably isn't a great option to you because you're probably going to burn through your mileage, burn through all of your kilometers, and then end up having to pay extra money. Leasing can sometimes mean a higher insurance rate, something to consider. There can be fees that arise at the end of your lease, like we've discussed, so you might end up having to pay a big chunk of money at the end. Your monthly lease payments go towards the use of the vehicle instead of the ownership of the vehicle. So you're not getting any value you don't get to own any of it. So you aren't building equity in the vehicle, you're just using it. You're not allowed to make irreversible custom changes or modifications to the vehicle. Cannot end lease inexpensively or easily before normal contract end date. So if things in your life change, it's challenge and expensive to end your lease agreement. And then excess wear and tear charges, something to be concerned about, particularly where we live and the weather is rough on our vehicles. So that could be something that could be hard for leasing a vehicle. So here's some direct comparison between if you're buying a new vehicle and leasing a new vehicle. So first off, the money. So if you're buying a vehicle, this requires more money upfront and each month. So feels more expensive because you have to put a down payment on generally on upfront, and your monthly payments are more expensive. So lease costs less upfront and each month, so you can afford a more expensive car. So then the bills is that you can pay off your auto loan, which eliminates a monthly cost. So if you buy a car and once you pay off the loan, then you don't have to have any more car payment. Where if with a lease, you're always making car payments. If you always lease, every lease you have a car payment, you never end your payments. With commitment, so when you buy a vehicle, you have the freedom to sell it or trade it whenever you want. With a lease contract, it's difficult and expensive to break. The dollars and cents, this graphic says, so to buy it usually costs less over leasing overall over time. So in the long run, it costs less, but in the short run, it feels like it does seem to cost more. With leasing, you can get a tax break if you use the car for business purposes. So something to consider. The time, it's yours to sell if you buy it or drive it for 20 years. You can do whatever you want with it. With a lease, you can upgrade to the newest model every couple of years. So if that's something that feels good to you, that's something to consider. So something else to keep in mind, when you're buying, the car value depreciates as soon as you drive it off the lot. That's what we talked about, how you lose value immediately. And with a lease, something to consider is that you'll owe fees for exceeding annual mileage limits or any damage to the car. So that is something to be just aware of. These are sort of the catches. All right, so let's look at an example about, with some conditions of a lease, how much you're actually going to pay. So how much will be paid to use the car for 3 years, assuming the security deposit is returned? So when the security deposit is returned, we can just ignore that number because you're going to add it in and then you're going to take it away. So because it is returned, because the vehicle is in good condition, we're just going to pretend it didn't happen. That's the easiest way to do it. So how we need to figure out how much you're actually paying for it. So there's here we have a $2,500 down payment, a $300 refundable security deposit. So that we're going to ignore because we're getting that back at the end in this question. Not always, but in this question. And then 3 years of monthly payments of $374.76 plus HST on each monthly payment. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out the HST on one payment. So that is $374.56 times 13%, which is 0.13. So let's get our calculator. 374.56 times 0.13, and that is $48.69. Okay, so that means that the total payment of each payment is going to be $374.56 plus $48.69. So let's add those together. And this is what you actually be paying every month. So $423.25 is your monthly amount with taxes included. So that means that 3 years of payments is equal to, well, 3 times 12, right? Because it's monthly. So 3 times 12 is going to be 3 years times $423.25. So 3 times 12 is 36 times $423.25. So we multiply that. We get $15,237. So over the 3 years, that's how much you pay in total for the monthly payments. So then the total cost is $2,500 for your down payment plus $15,237. So that is equal to, add them together, $17,737. So the total cost is $17,737 for that vehicle for using it for 3 years. All right, example 2. So the conditions of the lease are given below. How much will be paid to use the car for 5 years, assuming the security deposit is not returned? So this time, because it's not being returned, then we have to pay it and we're not getting it back. So we have a $5,000 down payment. We have a $450 refundable security deposit, which this time, remember, we're not getting back. So we have to make sure that we include it. And 5 years of monthly payments for $483.96. And then HST on each of the monthly payments. So we're going to do the same thing, HST. Now this time I'm going to do it all in one step because I often do it in 2 steps. But remember, we can do HST in 2 different ways. So we can do it times, it's 13% for the HST. But if we times the monthly payment by 1.13, then that means that we don't have to do the adding step. Because we're combining it all together. So 483 plus 96 times 1.13 is equal to $546.87. $546.87. So that is both the tax and the payment. That is the total payment amount because we did that one instead of 0.13 and just finding the tax and then adding it to the payment. This just is all together in one step. Remember, you can do either way. Both ways are fine. But just to save some time, I just did it in one step. So 5 years of payments is going to be 5 times 12 for monthly payments times $546.78. So 5 times 12 is 60 times $546.78. So to calculate that, 60 times 546.78. Oh, it's supposed to be 87. 87, my bad, is equal to $32,812.20. 32,812.20. Sorry, I did those numbers backwards. It happens. It wouldn't have made a huge difference, but still good to be accurate. Sorry about that. Okay, so the 5 years of payment is a total of $32,812.20. So that means that the total cost is the down payment, which is $5,000, plus the $450 non-refundable security deposit, plus the $32,812.20. So add those together. Well, we're still gonna have 20 cents. You can use a calculator, or I'm just doing it by hand right now. So $38,262.12. So the total cost is, and I write it out in a sentence to help make sure that I've actually answered what the question is asking, and to be really clear that I know what we're talking about. And that's how you do it if you are do not have a security deposit refund. Again, remember, you can do the payments and the HST either way. That doesn't actually change anything. All right, so now you're ready to do the practice problems. Sorry, the support questions on page 41, question number 1. So let's talk about the kilometer usage surcharge, which we've talked about briefly, but let's dive into it a little bit deeper. This is on page 42 of your booklet. So when you're leasing a vehicle, the vehicle has a maximum kilometer usage. If you go over the maximum usage, you have to pay an extra amount called a surcharge. For each extra kilometer, you pay a certain amount. So let's look at an example. Calculate the kilometer surcharge if the allowable usage is 75,000 kilometers, when the actual usage was 94,367 kilometers, and the surcharge was 14 cents per kilometer. So with these questions, there are 2 parts. So there's a few parts. One, in your contract, it'll always tell you what your allowable usage or what your limit, what your maximum amount is. This is a high maximum amount, but your maximum amount might be 20,000 kilometers. Is something that's often quite common. It might also say it per year or for the total time. Then your actual usage is how much you actually drove in that time frame that you were given, your lease was. And then the surcharge is how much you're charged for every extra kilometer that you drove. So you are not charged 14 cents for the 75,000 kilometers. That part is free. You're only charged the 14 cents for the amount that you drove extra. So first we need to figure out how much extra you drove. So we're going to we drove a total of 94,367, and we were only paid for 75,000. So we're going to subtract 94,367, take away 75,000, and we have 19,367. So 19,367 is how many extra kilometers you drove. So that means that that's how many, for each of those kilometers, you need to pay a surcharge of 14 cents. So to calculate the surcharge, we're going to do 19,367 times 14 cents. So times 0.14 to figure out how much money you end up having to know. Oh. So $2,711.38. So that is how much. So you need to pay an extra $2,711.38. This is why it's really, really important to read your contracts, your agreements, and make sure you're following them, because that's a lot of extra money to have to pay at the end when you're no longer using the vehicle just because you use the vehicle. This is one of the drawbacks of leasing and why it's really important to pay attention to your agreement. Okay, so here, example 4, calculate the kilometer surcharge if the allowable usage is 50,000 kilometers when the actual usage was 48,732 kilometers and the surcharge is 9 cents per kilometer. Okay, so again, the same thing. We need to figure out what the actual usage was, or how many extra. So we do the actual usage. So 48,732, take away what you were allowed, which is 50,000, which is equal to, let's do the on a calculator. 48,732, take away 50,000, and I get negative 1,268. I say, wait a second, why did I get a negative answer? Then I look, right, because did I actually reach the 50,000 kilometers? No, I only drove a smaller amount. So one, I could have subtracted, I could have got a negative number because I made a calculation error, but I need to look and say, okay, I need to look at the question and say, oh, I didn't actually drive the 50,000 kilometers. I don't have a surcharge. You do not need to do the calculation. If you read this question, and you could just say no surcharge. No surcharge, as didn't exceed the allowable usage. So you could just write that. That would tell me the answer. You don't have to do the calculation. If you do the calculation and you get a negative number, that's because you still have 1,268 kilometers before you hit that surcharge, or you hit the maximum limit. So that's why you have a negative number, is because you didn't go over your limit. Now, the key with this is that you have to make sure that you're subtracting the right numbers. You don't always assume the bigger number is how much you drove. You need to look at what the question says and make sure you understand what the question is saying. Lots of folks, lots of times in math classrooms, people just say, take the bigger number and subtract the little number. That is not always true. You need to make sure that you're doing what actually makes sense and what the question is asking. So in this question, the allowable usage was 50,000 kilometers. That's how much. So that is much that you've already paid for. The actual usage was 48,732 kilometers. So to figure out how many extra kilometers you drove, you always do your allowable usage. And so, you always do your actual usage, how much you actually drove, take away the allowable usage, how much you were allowed to drive, and figure out. And sometimes that the actual usage is smaller. And if it's smaller, that means that you don't pay a surcharge. So it's really, really important to pay attention to what the question is actually asking and not just put the numbers into a calculator. read the question to understand what the question's asking and make sure that you're answering the question that's actually asked, opposed to just doing things with numbers. It's a bit of a trick question, totally legit question. It happens. You don't pay surcharge. That's totally reasonable. Okay, so now you can do the support questions on page 42 to 43 and the questions 2 and 3. So then we're just going to look at the 5 steps to leasing cars, the actual process. So you figure out how long you want to lease your vehicle. Then you figure out your price range. So that's going to figure out what you can actually lease. You check out any deals to see if there's any deals from dealerships. Often there are. They run various incentive programs, so why you should pick them. Then you pick out the car. Hopefully you're staying within your budget, right? That's why you pick a budget first. You pick a budget first, not a car first. Then only look at the ones in your price range, because of course you're going to fall in love with something that is outside of your price range if you look at them, because there's going to have lots of great options. But if you can't afford it, don't go for it. Then you negotiate and you sign your agreement with the dealership. So there's a few things to think about before actually going in. It's a good idea to pre-plan opposed to just going in and hoping for the best. If you're hoping for the best, you're probably going to pay the most. All right, so let's do one more example. Lacey wants to lease a vehicle for her business under the following conditions: a 5-year term, a $2,200 down payment, monthly payments of $295, a security deposit of $500, delivery charge of $415, and kilometer allowance for 25,000 kilometers per year at 15 cents per kilometer for additional kilometers. The residual value at the end of the lease is $10,500, including taxes and fees. How much will it cost for her to lease the vehicle for 5 years if she returns the vehicle in good condition, having driven 130,000 kilometers over the 5 years? There's a lot going on in this question. This is why we're doing a practice, because sometimes there's a lot of information. It's not completely clear cut and broken down. So we need to figure out the total of the monthly payments for 5 years. We need to figure out if she has to pay a surcharge for her usage, and then we need to add everything all together. So first, we're going to figure out the monthly payments. Okay, so $295. We didn't talk about tax, so we're just going to ignore taxes for now. We're just going to say that's the total that includes taxes, because it doesn't tell us to add taxes on. For 5 years, that's a monthly payment. So 5 times 12. So remember, 295 times 60. So 295 times 60 is 17,700. So that's how much she paid in monthly payments. Okay, so then the other thing that we need to figure out is the kilometers. So because she was allowed to drive 25,000 per year, and she had it for 5 years, that means that in total, let's see how many was she allowed to drive. So 25,000 times 5. 25,000 times 5 is 125,000. So she was allowed to drive 125,000 kilometers. And she actually drove 130,000. So actual is 130. So extra is 130,000. Take 125,000, which is equal to 5,000. She drove an extra 5,000. So the surcharge is 15 cents per kilometer. So 15 cents times 5,000, which is equal to $750. Okay, so, and what is the total cost? So she returns the vehicle in good condition. That means that she is going to get her security deposit back. So we don't have to worry about that. So we have a down payment of $2,200. We have the total of the monthly payments. So that was $17,700. We have the delivery charge, which was $415. And we have the extra, kilometers, which is $750. So the total cost that she has already put into the vehicle is $2,200 plus $17,700 plus $415 plus $750 is equal to $21,065. So that's how much she's already put in. It has cost her $21,065 to lease the vehicle for 5 years. So then if she purchases the vehicle at the end of the lease, how much will she pay for it? So at the residual value, that's this part. So she's already paid $21,065 and it's still, the vehicle is still worth $10,500. So that means that if she wants to keep the vehicle, she's going to have to, she will have paid for it $31,565 because she's paying $10,500 for it at the end, but she's already paid $21,065. So in total, that's how much she paid in total, $31,565 for this vehicle in total. All right, let's consolidate what we've learned today. So we're doing lesson 15, which is leasing a vehicle. So we remember that leasing a vehicle is like a long-term rental, and there are both pros and cons. This is not something where this is the right option for every single person. If it is a good option for you, great, go for it. You know what is best for your life. It is not a good option for you, then don't do it. That is fine. This is not a perfect option for everyone. It depends on your situation. I've considered leasing a vehicle and it's never been something that really makes sense in my life. So you have to decide what is best for your life. Remember the kilometer usage surcharge. This is a calculation that you're going to need to practice. So the excess mileage times the surcharge rate. So how much extra kilometers you use times whatever the rate is that is given to you in the agreement. If you don't go over the usage, you don't pay a surcharge. Super important to remember. If you're not over that amount, you don't have to pay extra. And then the fine print and the procedures, just to remember that you potentially have to pay a refundable security deposit. If you're getting it back, then you don't need to add it in. But if you aren't getting it back, then you need to add it in. And the purchase price at the end of the lease is going to be determined based on the value of the vehicle at the end of the lease. And so if you're going to purchase it at the end of your lease, you're going to pay that on top of everything else that you've already paid. So it's really important to read that fine print and understand what it is that you're agreeing to. So our success criteria are that you can calculate the leasing costs. Hopefully that is true. And you can explain the likely fine print and the procedures when leasing a vehicle. So again, each leasing agreement is going to be different. So it's really important that you read the contract, read what it is that you're agreeing to before you agree to it. We call it the fine print because it's lots of information that is usually in small type to cram it all in and it's daunting and many people don't read it, but you are agreeing to it. So it's important that you read it. All right, and that wraps up our lesson 15 today. So if you have any questions about this lesson or of course any of our previous lessons, please reach out and connect with me. You can call me at 807-737-1488, and my extension is 2209. You could also call me toll free at 1-800-667-3703. If you'd like to email me, my email address is bronwyn.slate, and that's spelled BRONWYN.SLATE@nnec.on.ca. My Facebook profile and my YouTube channel are both under the name B Slate Wahsa, so that's a great place to connect with me, as well as go to YouTube channel and watch replays of our lessons if you need to. My hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. So that's the best time to reach me directly, though I'm really good at following up if you leave me a message or send me an email or a Facebook message outside of that time. I generally will connect with you the next day when I'm back in the office. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a lovely day. Miigwech.